Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto was first Captain America and Massive Harem Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the This Page Has Been Abandoned 93 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. The place, Calvary Hospital. The date, to all superhumans, 3 months since the tragedy of M-Day, where Scarlet Witch had lost control of her powers after changing the world twice. The situation today, unknown. The world would be getting a wake-up call though, soon enough. This much was sure. So what have we got, Mike? A doctor ironically named Doc asked the intern that was checking on a slightly charred blonde teenage boy. He had unruly blonde hair and 3 slashes on each cheeks, looking like whiskers. His ethnicity was an obvious blend of Caucasian and Asian, his eyes only having a slight almond shape to them. The burns were slowly dying down, healing even, making the doctor narrow his eyes slightly while the African-American intern, Mike, shook his head and sighed. Cops dropped him off, Mike said as he checked the heart monitor on the blonde's left, said he was in that fire off of East Avenue. I heard that pyro was the cause of it. See how his burns are healing? I think he has a healing factor, Doc simply replied as he glared with narrowed eyes at the blonde. Well, we don't have to worry about his kind anymore. Get me some adrenaline. Whoa, wait a minute, Doc, Mike said, stepping back in shock before looking at the kid in the bed. He just needs some morphine at most. The doctor narrowed his eyes at Mike and smiled as he said, Mutants are a dying breed, Mike. Why not just help them along? In the words of the good Reverend Stryker, man is the son of God, mutants are the son of Satan, Doc, Mike gasped out. Doc was one of the nicest people he had ever known. After M-Day though, Doc had changed, becoming colder and less friendly. He had had several mutants in her before today, but never had he been so harsh before. Cold maybe, but never harsh enough to kill someone. The doctor had a valid reason to despise mutants though, not that his excuse would make up for taking a life. His wife and daughter had been killed on M-Day, and if that wasn't enough, his life was saved by a mutant. Not just any mutant, a mutant that could heal. A mutant that could end his career. He wouldn't stand for it anymore. Doc looked at Mike and was about to bark at him to get some adrenaline when the heart monitor started to beep loudly, making both humans look at the blonde. He was breathing heavily and starting to twitch in his sleep. His eyes snapped open, an unreal red that made both doctors jump back. He darted his eyes between the two. To them, he looked scared. Then, to both of their surprise, he leapt at the doctor. The blonde, clad in only a smock, managed to somehow drive Doc through the wall with a roar, his eyes a dark red and red aura flickering around him. Fists smacking against flesh was what Mike heard and witnessed. Screams slowly became muffled as blood splattered onto the intern's face. When the screams died and whimpering crossed with groaning came from Doc, Mike backed away in fear as a red cloak-covered blonde with furious red eyes walked back through the hole in the wall. Mike swallowed as he tripped over a group of cords and scooted away from the blood-covered boy. Please Dante, please don't hurt me. I'll do anything. Mike finally managed to squeak out. The blonde stared at him for a moment before his red eyes died down to a very light pink before darkening to purple and finally stopping on a light blue. Spare clothes? He asked with a hoarse throat. With a new set of doctor scrubs on and a doctor cloak, the blonde closed his eyes before changing his appearance. Mike was wide-eyed. This guy had all the abilities of the A-listed heroes. The blonde nodded his thanks to the intern and left through the back exit. He left through the alleyways, ignoring the feeling of being watched. The blonde finally stopped about 3 blocks to the west, just outside the borough of Brooklyn. He sat down in the alley he was in, remembering how he arrived in the hospital, or trying to anyway. A flash went through his mind. Images, voices, etc., etc. It was a flashback moment in its fullest, despite being fragmented. Good morning, -36 Malawian kwachas. Your solitary confinement is over, a kindly old man said. He had a lab coat on and looked Asian, similar to him, a white beard on his chin and balding, revealing some liver spots. Professor Saratobi, the blonde greeted with a nod from the spot on the wall he was chained to. The old scientist smiled as he swiped his access card and entered the cell of the experiment. You know, Saratobi said, moving to unlock the chains holding the blonde in place, your father, Mr. Namikaze, would be very upset with me if you happened to get hurt by someone like Mr. Marino. Father is mad at me, isn't he? -36 Malawian kwachas asked as his head hung. Saratobi chuckled, making the teen look at him again. Far from it, the scientist said through his chuckles, making the blonde smile slightly as Sarutobi's eyes glistened with pride. He told me he couldn't be any prouder. Withstanding interrogation for 32 hours and then breaking free nearly 10 minutes later? Amazing. Simply amazing, Naruto-kun. The flash ended and the blonde shook his head to clear it of the headaches. Apparently he forgot exactly how he ended up in that fire. The unruly-haired blonde then sighed and stood, walking in the direction of a department store's back door, creating more of his red aura around his finger, and then shaping it into that of the key of the lock, breaking in effortlessly. He went directly to the men's department and grabbed a pair of black jean shorts, a dark orange belt, and a dark blue shirt with an orange frog on the front hopping across with the words "Do the hop" underneath it, also in orange. The blonde then went to the shoes area and pulled a pair of gray Nike sneakers on before slipping back out the back door and locking it again, making it so it was like he was never there. Unfortunately for him, the building right behind him happened to be a bank. A bank that was being robbed by a superhuman. A certain superhuman that weighed about 3 tons, muscled like no one could believe, and went by the name of Rhino, who just exploded from the back wall into the alley via charging through it. Hot damn, that was badass. One of Rhino's accomplices shouted at the burst. The alarms rang and the 3 accomplices ran into the alleyway, the hulking gray mass known as Rhino right behind them. Naruto narrowed his eyes and sent some of his red aura to cover to his feet, dropping the cover he had on himself. The blonde calmly walked up the side of the wall and followed the wannabe robbers. He was surprised when a voice entered his head, a feminine one. "Are you with Rhino?" the woman asked. Naruto narrowed his eyes and stopped walking as he heard the faint sounds of a jet engine rumbling overhead. Remembering his training that he had gotten from a psychic named Inoichi, the blonde thought back, "No, my girls tell me you're in A class. Unnamed, and unknown abilities aside from the strong aura you give off. Care to share some details?" the woman asked. Naruto racked his brain as he tried to recall what psychic woman would be skilled enough to search through his defended mind. The blonde pushed back into the woman's thoughts, much to her surprise, before he was shot out by the psychic. He did get a name from her though, Emma Frost. An image of a complete drop-dead gorgeous blonde wearing a white spandex-like outfit entered his mind. Emma Frost, a deeper voice said in his head. Naruto grinned as it continued, A-class psychic. Body can turn into a diamond substance. Headmistress of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. The 3 girls she probably was speaking about were the Stepford Cuckoos, triplet girls that were forged from a little bit of Frost's diamond heart, and the most powerful entity in the universe, the Phoenix Force. The 4 of them together make for a hell of a psychic team. Tread carefully, Kit. I'd rather not, Ms. Frost, Naruto thought back, making the woman aboard the Blackbird recoil in shock from the fact he learned her name. Just tell me whether you want me to interfere with this little training thing you have going on. How did you know? Emma asked. Naruto grinned as the Blackbird's cloaking device dropped, and the lights shined down on Rhino and his accomplices. Because no one but Spider-Man would bother with Rhino aside from a rookie team. It was true. The blonde knew his supervillain stats so well it was an art form. It might have helped he had trained with Phantom X, and knew almost every way there was to take down what he ranked from E to B villains. Rhino was a major D ranker, while his accomplices, being humans with fully automated weapons, were E ranked. Emma was dumbfounded as the new X-Men, consisting of Hellion, Rockslide, Prodigy, Elixir, Surge, and Mercury all leapt down from the Blackbird's side door. Beast followed behind them, only to offer Surge, the newest leader since Hellion had botched a mission and they had almost lost Wallflower, assistance. Emma left the Blackbird controls to Scott Summers, her co-headmaster, lover, and X-Men leader alias Cyclops, to go to the door's window and get a look at the newly found mutant. She scanned the area for him before her eyes locked on a waving figure that was standing on the wall. Yo, the boy thought as his waving hand dropped. Emma couldn't help but do several double takes, making the boy grin widely. Who are you? She asked with more force as she tried to pry into his mind. A sudden red flash coming from the boy's head made Emma grab her now throbbing head and glare at the tisking teen. Now that isn't nice, ma'am, the boy said with a slight respectful tone in his thoughts. At least I'm not picturing you and making you see that as you try to pry into my head. You're doing it now, aren't you? Emma asked him as her face dropped into a scowl. The teen's stance shifted uncomfortably before glancing down at the scene of the fight, his silence answering her question and making Emma even angrier. Your students need help. He commented, making Emma turn her attention to the fight and pinching the bridge of her nose in frustration. Rockslide's limbs were being tossed at the non-telepathic members, making Hellion's job as defense player that much harder. Elixir had gotten hit by one of the human boulder's flying fists, and was currently unconscious in a dumpster. Beast was doing his best to keep the three acrobatic gunmen from getting any serious wounds on the students while Prodigy put pressure on a bullet wound on his arm as he hid near the unconscious Elixir, waiting for his friend to wake up. Mercury and Surge were doing their best to dodge and counterattack Rhino's actions, only to attack each other and knock themselves out. "Oh shit," Emma said, preparing to open the doors when the teen's thoughts came to her again because she had forgotten to sever their connection. "Tell them to stand back," he thought in a no-nonsense tone as the headmistress blinked in surprise when he phased out of sight, reappearing behind Beast. "Need some help, Mr. McCoy?" Naruto asked Beast, making the blue-fuzzed man stop in his fight and look at the blonde behind him. "No, it can't be," Beast said in shock while the blonde grinned, revealing fang teeth, and his eyes turned red. He crouched as his red aura started to cover him, the aura taking the shape of his body only with claws and a tail. The three humans all locked their eyes on him before they widened them in fear. "What in the name of God? / what the hell is that ing thing? / I didn't sign up for this shit, man." Naruto's grin never dropped as he said in a menacing tone, "Let's go wild." He vanished from sight, Hank McCoy watching him with wide eyes. The fuzz-covered mutant was in complete shock and awe as the red aura-covered blonde destroyed the three wannabe robbers. The last time he had seen the blonde was almost 12 years ago, maybe even 13. He was the son of the most infamous promutant scientist in Japan, Mr. Minato Namikaze, and the most well-known promutant lawyer, Mrs. Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. Uzumaki, Beast thought with shock evident on his face, he's actually alive. "Come on!" Rhino guffawed as Hellion, who was struggling in his grasp, started hacking blood. "I'm barely squeezing you, mutant. Even the webhead can withstand this, but can you withstand this?" A teen's voice cried, making Rhino look up in time to be hit in the face with an extended and expanded red fist the size of a taxi cab. Rhino dropped Hellion as he was sent flying towards the street. The gray monster skidded into the street and crashed into a parked off-duty bus. The new X-Men all stood with groans and watched a strange blonde teen rush after Rhino. "Don't just sit there!" a voice cried. The students all turned to see Beast wrapping a knocked-over lamppost around the three humans before looking back at the teens. "Go help him." "Yes, sir, Mr. McCoy." The students chorused through their groans. They rushed after the blonde, hoping to help him stop Rhino. When they reached the street, though, they honestly wanted to help Rhino stop him. He was beating the stuffing out of the genetically engineered man with red aura covering his fists. Something at the base of his tailbone was bubbling along the aura. The villain was clearly unconscious, so much so that he wasn't even twitching as Naruto slammed fist after fist into his head. "Yo, Prodigy?" Hellion whispered. "What is that?" "I don't know, Keller," Prodigy whispered back before starting to inch towards the blonde, attempting to gain information from him while still holding his sore arm. Elixir had healed it as best he could while dazed. A certain rock-headed teen decided to take the direct irrational approach and gently remove the blonde from the half-dead villain. "Rag!" Rockslide roared as he detached his left arm and threw it at the blonde. The boy simply turned his head and looked at the oncoming fist, scoffing inwardly and batting it aside with his tail. A presence filled his head, making the blonde snarl and look up at the blackbird, the students following his glare, where Emma Frost was standing in the doorway. "He's half dead." "Get off of him," Emma shouted through her mental link with the boy. Naruto scowled before looking back at Rhino. The large Brooklyn man groaned in pain, his face now uglier than roadkill on the highway, and Naruto's eyes narrowed. "Head deserves it," the blonde growled as though he needed to feel Rhino's blood on his hands and as he raised his fist to deliver a final blow. The red aura on his arm was intense enough that it made it seem as though his flesh had melted away. It had, but the watching teens and teachers weren't aware of that. They were only aware of the energy growing in his fist. "Scott!" Emma shouted, the headmaster rushing into action. Before Naruto's energy finished gathering, Cyclops shot a beam of energy from his eyes directly into the blonde's side, sending him through the bus. Rhino merely dropped to the ground with another groan. Naruto saw only dark after being shot through the bus. Name is Naruto Uzumaki, Beasts, also known as Dr. Henry McCoy, his father's close friend and his godfather, voice echoed into his ears as he regained consciousness. Feigning unconsciousness, Naruto listened in on the conversation. "I thought he was long dead for about 12 years. You're sure he wasn't a mutant, Hank?" Scott's voice had asked. Naruto's mind was given information on the headmaster via his Killing Yahoo's Utility Universal Brain Implant, or QB, or Q as he sometimes called it, for short. Scott Summers, QB said, known as Cyclops, due to his concussive-powered laser eyes, and leads the X-Men. once married to Jean Grey/Phoenix before the Phoenix incident. A younger brother, Alexander Summers, known as Havoc. Havoc is similar to Cyclops that he can also fire concussive energy, but with more control, from his hands. Havoc's control comes with a simply put price: discharge or die. The blue-furred man shook his head in the negative. The sound of his mane swishing made Naruto cut QB off. I'm 100% positive of it, the scientist said to the headmaster/mistress and Logan. The berserker of the X-Men, Wolverine, had immediately smelt a new scent when the Blackbird returned. Hoping it was that of his clone/younger sister, Laura, Logan rushed to Scott's office, only to be mentally redirected by Emma to the infirmary. So what would you say he is now, Fuzzball? Logan asked with a raised eyebrow. Hank sighed. A Weapon X experiment. If Naruto could have opened his eyes and watched them, he would have seen them all widen their eyes before glancing at his prone form worriedly. Not for him, but for the other students. Already, a certain telepath was thinking of how to get rid of the blonde hazard for the greater good of her students. Before you ask, Logan, Hank continued, regaining everyone's attention, no? There is no trace of your DNA. His healing factor is stronger than yours, though. Logan blinked before chuckling loudly, which erupted into laughter. Once he had calmed down, Logan looked back at Hank. He said, I'm sorry, but could you knock the ing jokes off, Fuzzball? I'm not joking, Hank said in a completely serious voice. His healing factor was at work when I made it to his side on the other side of the bus. Halfway finished healing him, the 3 senior X-Men all felt their jaws pop open. Logan was the first to shake himself from their stupor and let out a low whistle as he gazed back at the slumbering blonde. Seeing his facial muscles twitch under his gaze, the Canadian smirked and said, Sleeping Beauty was faking. The other 3 looked at Logan before following his gaze and seeing the blonde sit up with a scowl. Sell out, Naruto growled at Logan, earning a chuckle from him. The blonde then looked to the one wearing sunglasses and his eyes flashed red. Throwing the covers off of himself, not realizing he was only in his boxers, Naruto stormed over to Scott and glared at him with narrowed eyes. Why did you shoot me? He asked through a growl. Logan smirked, already liking the blonde, while Emma, Scott and Hank all looked at him threateningly or cautiously. You were going to kill him, Scott said in a tight voice. Naruto arched a brow. So? That doesn't excuse you from shooting me, eyeballs. Scott had no rebuttal for that statement. His mind had gone blank as the teen before him, much like Logan's clone Laura, was obviously trained to not care for the loss of life. His mouth opened and shut as he tried to form a logical rebuttal, failing as he also tried to defend his own actions other than because I was told to. You can't just kill someone, Mr. Uzumaki, Emma spoke up in Scott's defense, making the glasses-wearing headmaster sigh in relief of being out from under the spotlight. Naruto scoffed and turned to her. Oh please, he said with a sneer, what I do compared to you mind readers is much kinder than when you with their minds and break them. People heal from physical damage in less than 6 months, if they aren't dead, at most, but a broken mind can take years or decades even to heal. Now tell me, which would you rather have happened to you? Emma stepped back with wide eyes as though she was slapped. She had never once thought of it that way, but not willing to admit that to this boy, she narrowed her eyes and put her hands on her hips. How dare you, you little monster! Naruto's eyes glowed dark red and the aura grew around him as his anger spiked. Say it again. I dare you to say it again. Beast and Logan immediately leapt into action, tackling the blonde to the ground as he thrashed around snarling. Emma immediately looked at Scott with the "we have to talk." Now look. The red glasses-wearing headmaster sighed and looked at the 2 brutes of the team struggling to hold down the blonde teen before following her to her office. Calm down, Naruto. Hank shouted as the boy thrashed. God, where is Peter when you need him? God damn it! Logan snarled when Naruto drove his elbow into the senior mutant's nose, breaking it. Naruto roared his anger. The roar echoed through the school, attracting the attention of most of the school's inhabitants. The new X-Men and a few others appeared at the doorway just in time to see the almost blonde teen that nearly killed Rhino throw the infamous Wolverine through the bulletproof glass and tossing the agile beast into the wall, causing it to crack. What is going on in here? A man with a Russian accent asked. He froze when he saw Logan groaning and getting to his feet, while Beast was in a heap on the ground, unconscious from the throw. Instantly he was covered with metallic skin. Pyotr Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus, QB said as the red shroud covered Naruto defensively. His skin transforms into pure organic steel. According to his data, it will be a pain for you to get through, Kit. Thanks a lot, asshole, Naruto scowled as his eyes narrowed. Colossus charged at him, tackling him through the weakened wall. The new X-Men all exchanged looks before looking at Surge, who sighed, sick of being looked at as the leader, and said, "Let's go help Colossus." "A strong boy you are," Colossus said as he backhanded the boy. Naruto snarled, his eyes flashing a bright red, before he dropped to all fours and charged, gripping onto Colossus with his clawed hands and knocking him onto his back. Colossus grunted when he fell to the floor, creating a sizable dent, before pushing his feet into Naruto's stomach, kicking him away. Colossus then kicked up to his feet and charged the blonde that was now shaking his head. Colossus tried to hit him with a haymaker, only for the blonde to suddenly raise his left arm and block the attack. Naruto's right hand wrapped around Colossus' neck, choking the Russian, and he slid his foot behind the back of the metallic man's. The new X-Men, except Elixir, who stayed behind to check on Logan and Beast, were just in time to see their second most difficult teacher to defeat in a spar get dropped onto his back and then a red aura-covered elbow drilled into his chest. Peter gasped as his heart stopped for a second, making his mutation stop, before it resumed and he passed out. "Holy Christ," Prodigy said, making the teens all look at him in shock. "She's way better than us." "I doubt that. Let's take him down." "Santo, with me!" Hellion barked before Surge could stop him. The rock-skinned teen rushed at the blonde, his fist cocked back. Naruto turned his head and got information about the two red-clad teens. QB scoffed, "Julian Keller aka Hellion. Class B telekinetic. Santo Vakoro aka Rockslide. Class C rock man/body manipulator. Hellion probably controls Rockslide's limbs after he separates them. Take him down and then go for the wannabe Ben Grimm." "Kit." "Gladly," Naruto growled to no one, his inner voice lost on everyone save for Prodigy. The psychic know-it-all for a moment gasped as he heard the voice in Naruto's head. "Wait!" He tried to stop the two from rushing him, to no avail. Rockslide launched his fist at the blonde, only for it to be smacked aside. As QB predicted, Hellion redirected the fist back at the red aura-covered blonde. Naruto growled and brought his fist back before driving it through Rockslide's fist, shattering it into pieces. He then rushed towards Hellion, the teen paling as he approached, before tackling him to the ground. He growled at the boy, frightening the telekinetic, before headbutting him with his enhanced strength. Hellion was knocked out instantly, as well as having a large growing goose head on his face and a shattered nose. The blonde stood and shook the daze off, healing the damaged brain cells before turning towards a one-armed Rockslide. With a feral grin, Naruto taunted him with a come-on gesture and said, "Bring it on, Cockslide." Rockslide felt his eye twitch and roared as he charged the nearly nude blonde. The new X-Men watched, to frozen in awe, as Naruto easily sidestepped Rockslide and tripped him. As Santo tried to get back to his feet, Naruto backed up before rushing at the Rockman. He leapt slightly and delivered a head-severing dropkick to the right of Santo's face. "Ow, ow, 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 ow." Rockslide yelped as his head rolled away from his body with a few bounces. Well, at least now he knew his head could be detached without dying. Naruto chuckled darkly and turned to the rest of the students, a grin on his face. "Who's next?" he asked as the adrenaline kept pumping through him. Mercury and Surge hesitated while Prodigy held his hands up and took a step forward. "We don't want to fight," the African-American teen said in a calm manner. Naruto pouted, unknowingly making Mercury blush. The only evidence on her face is it took on a slight red hue. "Why not?" Naruto whined, his hands twitching eagerly as he looked over the students. He asked for information on the three in front of him, and like always, QB delivered. Naruto's eyes went to Surge as the implant spoke. "Noriko Nori Ashida, aka Surge. An electropath. Can drain electricity from the air around her, and use it to enhance her speed, or discharge it in bursts. She'd be fun to play with, eh, Kit?" "Next," Naruto grunted quietly, making the two girls blink in confusion, while Prodigy swallowed as he listened in on Naruto's thoughts. Naruto looked at Prodigy, making the boy sweat as he heard Q speak, "David Aline aka Prodigy. The boy has a subconscious telepathy, learning everything that goes on as long as he is in the same room. I can tell he's listening in now." A shitty power if you ask me. He loses whatever information he obtains after the connection is lost. "Well, Davy boy, what do you think of my analysis?" "It's rather accurate," David said quietly, making the girls even more confused while Naruto chuckled. "Q happens to be the best there is," Naruto said with a grin, the girls completely lost now. Naruto's eyes went to Mercury, whose face turned a darker shade of pink under his gaze. QB growled, "Oh, she's nice, Kit. I like her file a lot." Insert perverted chuckle. Cecily Kincaid, aka Mercury. "She's not entirely human anymore, instead being more along the lines of an extremely attractive humanoid made of non-toxic mercury. She doesn't need to breathe or eat. Look at that, already she's the opposite of the human vacuum that you are. I say you take a crack at her, hint hint, wink wink. Shut up, Q, Naruto growled, looking away in embarrassment, while David cracked a smile. Surge and Mercury both looked between them in confusion when a roar from the resident wild man earned everyone's attention as Wolverine ran into the room, leaping at the blonde. Ah hell, Naruto said as his shoulders drooped, and he hung his head. Wolverine leapt at Naruto when the blonde looked up at him with his red eyes and held his expanded hand out. The red aura around his body extended and latched around the Canadian, holding him in midair. Ya ing twerp. Logan snarled as he struggled in Naruto's grip. Naruto arched a brow in amusement, and calmly placed Logan on the ground. The Canadian narrowed his eyes in suspicion, his claws still out and his stance defensive. Naruto took a deep breath as he calmed down, and the aura dissipated. He opened his eyes again to reveal a startling blue to the remaining new X-Men, save for Logan who had already seen them. Not feeling any more attacks about come from the boy, Logan slowly sheathed his claws just as Beast led Scott, Emma, and 2 more teachers into the room the blonde was fighting everyone in. Emma looked around and frowned at the sight of Peter, and her 2 top students either unconscious or immobile. She silently told Elixir to check on the 3, the golden boy eager to do so. She looked and was prepared to yell at the blonde only to see him looking at the ground with a struggling look on his face. I am sorry, he said with a bit of force on his part. The heads of the school felt their jaws drop as he continued, Don't get me wrong, Frost. I did mean what I said, but I am sorry I overreacted at your words. I do not enjoy any words such as that. I am a proud mutant, as that is all I have known to be. To be called a monster by one of my own, it's almost disgusting. Emma remained silent as Scott spoke and attempted to get the uncomfortable spotlight off of her. Did you knock Peter out? Alone? Yeah, it was kind of easy actually, the blonde admitted, rubbing the back of his head. I didn't have to use my more dangerous attacks. Lucky for him. The 2 heads of the school blinked in confusion before Naruto raised his arms to cover his chest. What type of mutant, save for the Juggernaut, can knock Peter Rasputin, the Colossus, unconscious without a single fatal blow? They looked at the blonde as verbal shiver escaped his lips. Can I get some clothes or something? Naruto asked. I've just realized I'm again. Naruto found himself once again in the infirmary, now fully dressed in his clothes, with 3 platinum blonde girls that were immensely attractive. He would have spoken to them and asked why they were in there if they weren't trying to breach his mind, something that ticked him off about telepaths. They had no manners, whatsoever. He sighed as QB worked hard to keep them all out of his inner thoughts and memories, the strain slightly affecting the blonde boy. You can just ask if you want to know about me, Frost, Naruto sneered to no one. In her office, Emma Frost scowled and resumed trying to dig up her own information on the blonde via computer. She had convinced Hank that the Stepford Cuckoos were checking for mental damage while she drew up a file for him so he could be a student. Both were lies, even Beast knew it, but he also was curious about what the boy had been through so he allowed it. Smug little prick, Emma grumbled. The Cuckoos all transferred her thoughts to the blonde accidentally, and he chuckled. You know, Naruto said to the 3 psychics, you aren't going to get anywhere this way. Is that so? Phoebe, the one who introduced herself to be Phoebe, asked. At his nod, Celeste said, What do you suggest then? Well, you can never mind, the teen said with a shake of his head, you'll never go for it. Tell us, Mindy said as the 3 all narrowed their eyes at him. The whiskered teen grinned back at the 3 of them. You could ask me nicely if you want to get in my head, Naruto said as he rose his finger, and maybe, just maybe, I'll have my Biju back off. Biju? The 3 girls chorused in confusion. Naruto immediately realized his mistake and shut up. The 3 Cuckoos backed off from his mind and spoke amongst themselves, via mind link of course, before turning back to the boy. With discomfort written on their faces, and the image of a disbelieving Emma Frost in their minds, Mindy started, Naruto Uzumaki. Let us in your mind, Phoebe spoke. Naruto glanced at Celeste, knowing she would be the deal-maker or breaker. Please? Celeste managed to get out through her mouth. Naruto grinned. Well, that wasn't so hard now, was it? He asked them, earning glares from the girls as they knew he somehow knew they had issues showing emotion after the deaths of their sisters. The blonde readjusted his seating and placed his hands in his lap, one overlapping the other, before he shut his eyes and took a deep breath. As he exhaled, he could feel the 3 enter his mind, the faint evidence of a 4th following. Naruto's mindscape. What is this place? Emma asked herself as they walked through a tunnel filled with pipes and water covering the floor. It looks like a sewer? A voice finished for her. The 4 psychics all turned to see the teen leaning against the pipes with a bowl in his hand, chopsticks in the other. He slurped up the noodles in the bowl and hummed in pleasure as the food went down his throat. Yeah, well, you'd understand if you'd been through what I've been through. A self-manifestation? Phoebe gasped out, her sisters also shocked from this development. People usually had some form in their consciousness, but few were hardly aware of them. It was rare to find someone that was. Naruto chuckled and placed the chopsticks in the now empty bowl, snapping his fingers and willing it away before he turned to them and outstretched his arms, and greeting them with, "Welcome to my mind." "Your mind is a sewer?" Emma asked as she crossed her arms. Naruto stuck his tongue out at her and pulled down on his bottom eyelid as well as flipping her off. While she fumed silently, Naruto smirked and turned around. "Come on then," he said, "time to meet the real brains of the operation." Naruto led them all through the sewer, only pausing briefly when they stepped in front of two doors, one marked 5 and one marked 8. He stared at them for a brief second before continuing, making the following 4 girls all blink. The blonde stopped again in a large dark area, soon to be filled with a large red light. The cuckoos and Frost shielded their eyes with their arms until the light died down. In front of them now was a fox that was the size of a horse, 9 tails flowing behind it. Naruto was petting it affectionately on the head and turned back to them, his eyes now the ruby-red orbs that were the only warning he had before he attacked. "This is Killing Yahoo's Utility Universal Brain Implant," Naruto told them, "QB, or Q for short. He's the one that tells me what I need to know when I need to know it." "Oh great," Q said as it opened a single slitted red eye and looked over the newcomers, more blondes. "And they're telepaths? What a pain in my non-existent ass you are, Kit." "Oh, shut up," Naruto replied with an eye roll. "You keep bitching about not having any company. And when I bring some, you bitch about M. Make up your damn mind." "Dumbass," Q growled. "No ass," Naruto snapped back, effectively silencing the AI before looking back at the dumbfounded telepaths. Smiling at their odd states, Naruto asked, "You alright, Frost? I mean, surely you've met a brain-implanted jaunty upgrade, right?" "A what?" Emma and the cuckoos chorused. Naruto groaned while QB chuckled as he started to explain. Brain-implanted jaunty upgrade (Biju) is a type of artificial intelligence implanted into mutants raised at the Lower Executive Anti-Friends of Humanity facility, or LEAF, Q stated, its words blowing the telepath's minds. "LEAF is where I was designed, created, perfected and implanted into the kit here. For some reason, my creator designed me to take on the personas of a kitsune, possibly because of his wife's love for mythology revolving around the beast, thus explaining my nickname for him. All other information on my symbiotic relationship with Kit is classified." "An artificial intelligence?" Phoebe gasped. "We thought Danger was the only one," murmured Mindy. "Apparently we were wrong," concluded Celeste. Emma Frost could hardly comprehend what she was hearing. Another question came to her mind and she looked at the blonde teen with whiskers on his cheeks. "What about his powers?" Emma asked with narrowed eyes. Q looked at Naruto, who shrugged and stretched his arms. A light yawn escaped his mouth, a small yip following, earning the attention of the Stepford cuckoos. Kit's powers seem to be similar to telekinetic abilities and a physical manifestation of spiritual and physical energy which we call aura, the AI said. "So far, the Kit has managed to create a physical cloak, as you've seen, taking the shape of a beast. He loses control of his bloodlust when a second tail starts to form." "What about his healing factor?" Frost continued, not noticing the drooping eyelids of the blonde in question, or the fact I saw him walking on a wall. "What are those abilities from?" "The same byproduct," Q answered, noticing its host's drowsy state as his head drooped for a moment, snapping back up as one of the AI's tails brushed against his calves. The cuckoos all noticed the teen's exhaustion, even if their teacher and idol hadn't. Mindy even cracked a smile at his tired, childish state, making her sisters all glance at her in amusement as they all felt a brief emotion they had felt long before. Celeste and Phoebe narrowed their eyes at Mindy, who looked away. "Anything else you want to ask us?" Naruto asked with slight annoyance as he sat cross-legged in midair, red aura keeping him in the air. "'Cause now I'm feeling tired." As the blonde yawned, QB looked over at him before looking back at the telepaths with narrowed eyes. As the 9 tails slowly wrapped around the blonde, who was starting to look more childish by the minute with each yawn, the AI spoke. "I think it'd best you leave." "Now, you have no right to tell us what to do," Emma started, stopping when the AI narrowed its eyes and the tails completely covered the blonde from their sight. "You have no right, bitch," QB snarled, growing to the size of a 10-story building, shoving its snout in her face, making her take a step back and activate her diamond defense as it snarled at her. "You may rule the school and minds out there, but in here, I rule supreme. Do you understand me?" "If you think I'm going to leave because," Emma started, once again being interrupted as the red aura began pouring from the tails of the AI and started wrapping around the neck of the headmistress and her students, choking them. I asked if you understood me, the fox-like AI snarled, its eyes now completely red as the tails tightened around their necks. Why yes, Emma and the cuckoos gasped out, you understand. Then leave, QB shouted, its eyes glowing a dark red. Reality, infirmary. The cuckoos all stumbled back, falling into the arms of Logan, Scott, and Hank respectively as Emma sat up in the chair next to Naruto's bed. The headmaster of the academy assisted the two teachers with laying the telepathic triplets in nearby beds as Emma stood and recollected the events that had just happened. Scott returned to Emma's side, letting her lean into him as she looked down at the whiskered blonde. What happened, Emma? Scott asked his lover. I entered your office to ask about what grade I should give David on his English exam only to see you slumped on the ground, gasping for air. The boy has an AI in his head, the blonde woman commented quietly, as her hand went to her very sore throat, and it would be best if we tried to. I dread speaking these words, enroll him into the school. Wait, hold up, Scott said, fully comprehending her words as his brows furrowed. He has an AI. You mean like Phantom X and EVA? Damn, a gruff voice commented from the right. The two looked to see Logan looking at the blonde with a slightly saddened look. Scott instantly understood. Logan lost his life to Weapon X, and ever since he's had to deal with a psychotic ex-lover, a father/brother figure, a clone/little sister, other Weapon X rejects, assassins, Rouge Hydra operatives, and then some. Emma, on the other hand, didn't. She cared only for the safety of her students, and she hardly trusted Logan due to his past. But the blonde in front of her needed help, even if he had complete control over his powers. It was his mindset that needed help. She turned to the two in front of her before announcing a staff meeting in her office telepathically to the other teachers. A few moments later, all 7 of the teachers were gathered in her office. Amara Aquila, aka Magma, the foreign language teacher, sat next to Danielle Moonstar, aka Mirage, the physics teacher. The two were former X-Men, having retired to teaching the new batch and only going back into action under intense circumstances. Emma explained to everyone what she and the cuckoos had experienced in the mind of their new resident. When she had finished, everyone was astounded, save for Logan, though he was still shocked. So what do you suggest, Frost? Logan asked her. Emma sighed and looked at the ground. Perhaps we don't enroll him. His artificial intelligence makes up for his intellect, and who knows what type of schooling he got at this leaf. Maybe we should try and give him a job as a student teacher? Amara suggested. The others all blinked at their youngest coworker's suggestion and thought it over. It was a good idea. What class, though? Danielle asked. Instantly, Wolverine and Colossus grinned. You want me to be a combat teacher to kids my age? Naruto asked as he sat back in his bed, a glass of water in his hand. You realize I will teach them to kill if necessary. You won't, Emma shot back sternly. Naruto smirked her way and leaked a bit of his aura out, allowing it to take the shape of a small fox perched on his shoulder. He looked at his newfound perched friend and asked, Can you believe this shit? It's amusing, Kit. Very amusing, hello nurse, the fox said, its eyes locking on Amara. Tell me you're the kid's age. Please tell me you're the kid's age. And away you go, Baka. Naruto groaned with a shake of his head and cut the connection, making the apparition vanish. The blonde ran his hand through his hair before looking at his fellow blonde with his blue eyes. Sorry about that, Miss Aquila. Q means well, but me grandfather's influence on his design pops up every now and again. Amara giggled. It's quite all right. I thought it was very flattering. I'll be sure to tell him that, the blonde replied with a small grin before looking back at Emma. I'll take the job. Teaching killing or not is up to whoever is teaching that day. He looked at Logan, who understood the hidden message within his words and nodded. The blonde grinned back before looking at Scott. So, Shades, what's first on my agenda? Hank stepped forward, offering him a vitamin that Naruto downed easily and cleared with a gulp of the water in his hand. He then hopped to his feet, rolling his neck and shoulders simultaneously before he was led to the danger room, which he entered alone. The observation center above holding most of the students, mainly the new X-Men, and the other teachers. Emma approached the microphone and spoke into it. This is just a simulation to see how you react in a combat situation. Your tasks are arranged from high priority to low priority, and can be completed in any way you deem fit. The tasks are as followed. Eliminate the main threat, in this case being Kid Omega and Juggernaut. Save the downed cannonball before he is killed by the approaching sentinels. You have 15 minutes. Naruto grinned, his aura activating in a blink of the eye, and he vanished in a blur of red towards the direction of Kid Omega. This surprised the new X-Men, Who would have considered Cannonball the larger priority, followed by Juggernaut, and then Kid Omega? Emma was surprised, expecting him to go for Juggernaut first, but was also impressed while the other X-Men were just downright astonished. Why go after Kid Omega? Julian asked. What about Cannonball? Or Juggernaut? It's a smart move, Colossus said as Naruto expanded his right arm into the size of a bus, slamming it into the Kid Omega and defeating it with ease. Our comrade down there knows he is more than enough to take on the Sentinels and Juggernaut, his ability to create a type of armor around him making for a good defense against physical attacks, but pure energy or telepathic attacks are his weak spot. Quite ingenious. Kid's smart, Logan said, taking a sip of his beer as Naruto blew a hole through one of the 3 sentinels surrounding Cannonball. Knows not to waste time and took Kid Omega out quickly, brutally, but quickly. Damn, Santo grumbled as Naruto picked Cannonball up and threw him over his shoulder, carrying him to the designated safe zone while the remaining sentinel tried to shoot him down. And he's gonna be joining us, right? Wrong, Scott said, shocking the students. He's going to be teaching you. What? The new X-Men all chorused in an outrage. Naruto dropped the cannonball sim on the designated safe zone before checking the clock in his head. 5 minutes to take down the Juggernaut. Remember, his only weakness is similar to your own. How are you going to beat him? Blow his brains out. Naruto roared as he loosely clenched his left hand and started moving it quickly around his other hand, charging a small ball of red and blue energy in his aura-covered hand. The energy swirled around, forming a small circle, as the unstoppable man known as Juggernaut roared and charged at him. The blonde made a small leap, pulling his hand back before shoving it forward. React! Naruto roared, his red eyes practically glowing as his attack connected with the headpiece of the Juggernaut. The headpiece shattered, shocking the witnesses, and the boy's attack continued, brutally destroying the Sim Juggernaut head. Naruto panted, calming himself as his aura died down, and he fell to his knees. Around him the simulation of a destroyed battlefield vanished. 3 minutes and 53 seconds flashed on the display screen, Hank McCoy shaking his head in disbelief that the boy beat the X-Men's best time, both the individual high score and the team's. Logan highly approved of the event, smirking as he took another sip of his beer. Emma was disgusted, amazed, and intrigued by the boy's attack. Cyclops was impressed by the tactical assault, seeing possibilities emerge before him within the blonde. Peter approved of the boy's calm state, showing that the blonde had control over a grand portion of his emotions, but had to work on talking to himself. Amara had to pick her jaw off the ground, not seeing any teen cause that sort of destruction since, well, ever. Danielle was already going through possible simulations for him to go through to further test his will. The new X-Men and other students were just in shock. Naruto turned and looked up at the observation area, asking the question, "What's next?" Over the next 3 hours, Naruto completed simulation after simulation, beating the high scores with ease. Even in assassination prevention on the simulated Senator Kelly, the X-Men thought about testing to see if his personal feelings would get in the way of the prevention, went without a hitch for him. They were surprised when not only did he save the senator, but he had effortlessly captured the assassin without a chase. "My God in heaven," Peter whispered as Naruto panted beneath them, having finished his 50th simulation in a row. "What is he?" "That's enough for now, Naruto," Hank said into the mic, the blonde reverting to a neutral state before sitting down and meditating. Hank shook his head in disbelief. "Minato, you crazy bastard. He's definitely an Omega level," Logan grumbled, planning on introducing the blonde to a certain group of heroes later. "We gotta make sure Fury doesn't sink his claws into him." "Logan's right," Scott said, his eyes narrowed behind his shades, "but he is going to need a designation." "Warning, Code Red, warning, Code Red." The mansion's computerized voice rang through the area. Emma went silent as the cuckoos, who were watching the news and listening to the woman's observation of the blonde, telepathically told her what happened. Emma turned to the students, and her peers said in a firm tone, "Everyone to the living room. Now. Logan, get Naruto suited up, we're going to need his help. Danny, Amara, stay here with the kids." Everyone left without haste, the students all now concerned as the mansion continued to blare alarms. Scott and Hank looked at Emma, the telepath having a distressed look on her face. "Someone has just blown up a human elementary school in Connecticut," she said. "Over 300 students were in that school." Scott pulled her into his embrace, her sobbing muted in his shoulder, and he turned to Hank, Logan, and the recently gathered Naruto, and said quietly, "We're moving out in less than a minute. Hank, get him a suit. Logan, prep the Blackbird. Move." Naruto pulled at the collar of his sleeveless black shirt with red designs crossing the chest in an X. He was surprised when the collar adjusted on its own, remembering that Beast had called it a type of smart fibers that made up the suits. He wore fingerless gloves, the same black as his shirt and cargo pants. He was forced into the tights, but pulled the cargos on over them, and black and red steel-tipped boots. The blonde glared out the side of the Blackbird at the mob forming around the taped-off area, crying for the heroes that were pulling people out of the wreckage's blood. For good reason, too. Emma had explained what happened. "Open the hatch," he growled, Hank and Logan looking at the newest member of the X-Men with confusion. He glared at both of them and snarled, "Did I ing stutter? Open the ing hatch." Hank sighed before pressing the buttons near his console and opening the hatch, allowing Naruto to jump from the Blackbird and land quietly as his aura enshrouded him. Naruto ran towards the epicenter of the attack, wondering who would do such a thing, when he saw rubble move and a small hand stick out. The blonde went into action, pulling back on his aura until it only affected his strength, and was no longer visible. He acted without haste, not noticing the growing reporters now locking onto his form, and ripped rocks and rubble away, inwardly swearing to kill whoever was responsible for this. When he finished, a banged-up 7-year-old girl, shielded by a door, was visible. She had short brown hair and green eyes, bruises covering her body. "My God," Naruto muttered, his eyes shutting before looking at her with kindness resonating in the red orbs. He carefully picked her up bridal style and carried her to the ambulance, and the EMTs working on them. He forced a small amount of aura to cover her leg, giving her a scan. "She'll live. No serious damage. Can't say her mind's going to be okay, though," the AI stated. Naruto clenched his jaw and set the girl on the passenger seat of the ambulance, waving away one of the EMTs. He grabbed a cloth from one of the EMTs and poured some water from a Dasani bottle on it before carefully cleaning the dirt away from her bruises on her arms, as well as fighting back one of the many memories in his mind. "Why?" a quiet voice asked. The blonde looked at the girl, her eyes filled with tears and her voice hoarse. His eyes softened and he carefully cleaned some dirt away from her cheek. "I don't know," he whispered back, "but I will find out." "That's a promise." He continued to assist the EMTs. His anger only would have grown had he gone to save more people, the green-eyed girl sticking to his side like glue. She watched as he made red aura cover his finger whenever he checked someone that came by and then told the EMTs who needed what and how much. "Excuse me, sir?" a reporter asked from behind Naruto. Naruto wiped his forehead off with his arm and turned to face them. "Yeah, what do you want?" he asked. He looked around to see the other reporters slowly approaching, when his eyes locked on someone trying to leave the area. Long white hair, a trench coat, and blue boots. The collar popped up alerted Naruto that this was someone dangerous. "Kid, it's him," Q growled. "The one that did this. The one that caused this destruction. He must have been hiding. He's limping, get the bastard." "Gladly," Naruto growled, his eyes glowing red as his aura covered him. People gasped and took steps back when he vanished in a red blur, reappearing in front of the man. "Oh," Nitro said as he tried to will some energy to explode into his hands. "Stay back. I'll kill everyone here." "Gives me more of a reason to kill you," Naruto snarled, a branch of his aura coming out and wrapping around his body, severely burning him. Nitro shrieked in pain while Naruto lifted the villain into the air. He looked at the mob and a smile crossed his face. "Here's the one responsible," he shouted. "Now should he rot in prison, like the good old Captain America would have him do?" "No!" was the collective response. Naruto grinned, his eyes glowing red. "Death it is, then!" he cheered, raising his hands and crushing them slowly. The energy around Nitro tightened, the man screaming all the while. People became sickened, some looked away, others cheered the blonde on. The X-Men, Captain America, Iron Man, and more heroes all rushed to the commotion, barely getting through the reporters and crowd. "What are you doing?" Iron Man, otherwise known as the Stark Industries head Tony Stark, shouted. "You can't just kill him." Naruto tuned him out, his eyes narrowing, and he pulled his arms away with a roar, the villain known as Nitro being torn in half. People were shocked that he actually did it. Even more were horrified. "Oh my God, Captain America, the super soldier from 1945 named Steve Rogers," whispered in disbelief. Soft grunting came from the crowd and the small girl pushed through, rushing to the blonde's side and latching onto his leg. The heroes and humans alike were shocked when the blood-covered boy looked down at her, his powers vanishing instantly at her touch. Her eyes glowed a bright green as she looked up at him in concern. "She's an absorber," Q said in awe while Naruto picked the girl up. She wrapped her arms around his neck and rested her head on his shoulder with a yawn. Q continued his observations. "If we have Frost give her a checkup, I believe we will find she has awoken her ex-genie. Amazing." "Sally." A woman cried, pushing through the crowd and gasping when she saw the girl hanging onto a blood-covered hero, more heroes staring in disbelief at the sight. Naruto looked at the girl before looking at Frost and then finally the mother of the girl, or who he assumed to be the mother. "Ma'am," he said softly, "we need to talk." Naruto moved towards her when a reporter approached and held a microphone to his face, a cameraman following. Sir, why did you kill Nitro when he should have been given a trial?" the reporter asked. Naruto narrowed his eyes. "What jail can hold a man that could explode at will?" he asked with an edge to his voice. "None. He was a threat to the world, a large one, even if he was only thinking small-time bank robberies and assassinations. We are better off without him, and although it doesn't bring the dead back, it gives closure to the group here. I know that many here, X-Men, Cappy, and the Tin Man don't approve of my actions. It had to be done." The blonde continued, talking to the nation directly and unknowingly giving a certain two heroes ideas. If this had been left alone, the government would have offered the prick a deal or some stupid shit like that. We shouldn't let powerless, or those with the inability to defend themselves against superhumans, have to worry about heroes arguing with politicians. It's pointless. Heroes give without asking, politicians promise but don't follow through, and normal people live in arrogance, or a pretend world. Let the politicians deal with humanity. Personally, I think S.H.I.E.L.D. should only intervene when shit hits the fan and heroes need help. Are you saying you approve of the hero registration law? A reporter asked. Naruto sighed, knowing he would be stuck in this position, while the mother of the girl in his arms watched him with worry. He silently swore against talking to reporters off before her replied. I don't care about the law, Naruto said honestly. It has its ups and downs, but I don't know enough about it to have a stand on it. In my honest opinion, the people should be able to know who to trust and who not to trust, but making it a law might be taking it too far. People close to a hero could be targeted if information like that was available. So you are saying that we should have a right to know who is who without risking the lives of innocents? Ben Riley, a reporter for the Daily Bugle, asked with a smile. Quite noble, but impossible, isn't it? Hey, you're talking to a guy that knows somewhere out there is a man mutated by gamma radiation into a monster with a rage that rivals my own. Naruto snapped back with a grin, turning a more friendly face on the red-headed reporter. That sounds impossible, doesn't it? Touché. Ben chuckled before he asked the question everyone was wondering. By the way, what is your name? Naruto paused. A memory entered his mind. Dr. Sarutobi smiled at him. He was at least 12 or 13, and 4 dead masked men lie around his body, blood decorating the boy and the ground. I'm impressed, Naruto-kun, the old scientist chuckled. It looks as though you had just gone through a war zone. You really are a one-man army, aren't you? As though you are one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. When you leave here, might I suggest a name for you? Opening his eyes, now blue since he had long calmed down, the blonde spoke softly. You can call me War. Thank you for saving my little girl. War, Sally's mother, a young woman in her early 20s, said as she took Sally back from the blonde. War stood with her on the sidelines as the reporters and crowd went back to watching the heroes help the injured, though still glancing back at the still blood-covered teen. The blonde teen grinned back at her and held his hand out, which was surprisingly clean, to which she took and shook his hand. Any time, Mrs.? He started, failing to get a name from the brown-haired woman. Just call me Maria. Maria McTaggart, she said, shaking the mutant's hand. War arched a brow. You wouldn't happen to be related to Amora McTaggart, would you? He asked. Maria sighed dramatically as she took her hand back and smiled back at him. Yes. I'm her niece, she replied, and before you ask, no. I don't know if she is working on the cure for the M-Day fallout. Not what I was gonna ask, War said to her. Although that's a bummer. I was going to ask why no one, not Cyclops or Frost, hell, why Wolverine didn't recognize you. Maria giggled, probably because Charles and Mora never got around to introducing me to the X-Men. You're the first one I've ever met. Well, I wouldn't say I'm a member, War admitted. I just happen to be the most useful in this situation. Either way, I'm grateful to you, Maria said with a smile before asking, so what did you want to talk about? War looked at the girl in Maria's arms before asking, what do you know about her father? Oh, him, Maria said as her smile fell. I don't know his name, just some random guy I had a fling with during a party about 8 years back. Why? War sighed and crossed his arms and looked around before leaning in and whispering, she's a mutant. Maria remained quiet before holding on to her daughter protectively. What do you mean? War sighed, knowing this would be difficult to explain, and looked around for Emma before finding her. Opening a telepathic connection with her via Q, War informed her about the girl and her mother, and who they were. Emma turned to Cyclops, explaining what she was going to do, before joining the mutant and mother. I assume he's told you? Emma asked the woman. Maria nodded and Emma looked at War, who shrugged and put his hands in his pockets. Emma sighed and rubbed her forehead. We need to go talk somewhere less crowded. My house is just 2 blocks that way, Maria said, pointing to the right. The blast hardly nicked our street. That'll do, Emma said, following the woman as she began talking to her about her identity and what she did in comparison to her aunt. War walked on Maria's left, his eyes glancing to either the mother or daughter while he conversed with his AI. She's not a problem, Q stated. I think she'll be able to control it in time. But will she be able to turn it on or off? Naruto asked Q, who remained silent. The blonde sighed. Figures. If we can convince her mother to let us take her in and help her develop her abilities, I can determine that, Q said. But unless that happens, I don't know about now. War remained silent when Maria opened the door for them, setting Sally on the couch carefully before turning to the two as War shut the door quietly. She led them into the kitchen and asked, Can I get you anything? Coffee? Coffee sounds wonderful right about now, Emma said as she sat down at the island in the center of the kitchen. War opted to lean against it and shook his head no. After pouring the headmistress for Xavier some coffee and getting some for herself, Maria looked at War and asked, So why do you think Sally is a mutant? She siphoned off some of my aura, War said, making a small amount cover his hand, and not the non-lethal kind. My suspicions are that she has the now rare energy draining ability. Is that bad? Maria asked in a concerned tone. War lowered his hand with his aura dispersing from it as he shook his head. I can't say for sure, he said in an upset tone, but I can tell you this, if S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, or anyone else gets word of her abilities, they will take her. Why? Maria asked loudly, her voice raising slightly. Emma shushed her, reminding her of her snoozing daughter, and waited for her to calm down. Mutants with the ability to drain powers or energy have always been on the Omega level watch, the White Queen said, if War is right, and I believe he is because I have 3 of my most trusted students checking with our computer, Cerebro. She, along with War and myself are appearing. Having known what Cerebro was, thanks to her aunt, Maria held her head in her hands. Oh God, he was a mutant, oh my God. Do you know his name? Emma asked, already searching her mind for the answer. War saw the look of concentration on Emma's face and frowned before looking back at the woman only a few years older than himself. He could feel the sadness emitting from her, and frowned even more. No one should ever have that much worry on their face, especially not a mother. Maria spoke when the name came to her. He told me it was Kim's son, I think. No sooner did the words leave her mouth did War groan as Q snarled, I knew it. I knew it. Let's hunt him down. Let's find that traitor. I told you to kill him all those days ago. It's a cover, War instantly said, earning the attention of Emma Frost. I'll explain later. Have you gotten word from him lately? No, Butte, oh my God, what if he comes after Sally? What will I do? Maria asked as sobs started to come from her. Emma frowned and was about to offer the one thing she could when War spoke up again. Both of you could join us back at Xavier's, War offered. Both women looked at him with different faces. On Maria's was one of shock, curiosity, and gratitude, while Emma had a scowl, obviously showing her disapproval. War narrowed his eyes at the former White Queen, the irises flickering red, and he cracked his knuckles subtly. He was challenging her to defy his offer, knowing she had only 2 defenses, both of which he could easily get past if necessary, and she knew that fact too. Defeated, Emma looked back at Maria and forced a smile, backing War's offer. Maria smiled as tears rolled down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered while Emma felt something she hadn't felt since Charles had recruited her into the Xavier faculty. Something she hadn't felt since she first helped a family accept that someone was a mutant, Julian, and recruited a member of the Hellions for the first time. Fulfillment. Damn man, Santos said lowly from his spot on the ground as he sat in front of the couch as he watched a video of the interview of the newly named War on the television. Julian nodded his agreement, while he glanced at Josh, who was pacing as he looked at his cell phone. The poor guy was still obsessing over his girlfriend's injury from post-M Day. I don't know, I mean, he looked hot, sure, but maybe red isn't his color, Cassidy said into the phone as she sat in the lounge chair and chatted with her friend Ron Sinclair aka Wolfsbane. Ron was a member of the X-Force Investigative Service and one of Cassidy's closest friends, seeing as she is a few years older than the Mercury girl. What color would you give him then? Ron asked. She was currently in the dwindling area of New York known as Mutant Town with the rest of the X-Force. She was watching the news while the rest of the team was out investigating. Maybe a lighter red or orange, Cassidy said as she looked at the footage of War on the television. The Mercury girl blushed slightly when the girl in the blonde's arms nuzzled into his neck, finding the scene adorable. Are you talking to Ron? Nori asked her friend. Cassidy nodded, to which the blue-haired girl said, "Tell her I said hi." The red-headed girl rolled her eyes. "Nori says hi, by the way." "Konnichiwa, Noriko-chan," Ron shouted through the phone, making Cassidy roll her eyes and pull the phone away from her ear. Noriko and Soraya, the Arabic mutant called Turab, Dust in Arabic, giggled while the red-headed new X-Men member shook her head. She put the phone back against her ear, just in time to turn a glowing red when Ron asked, "So how old is this War exactly?" "He seems like my kind of guy." Ron, War sneezed for the fourth time, rubbing his finger under his nose while holding on to the legs that were draped over his shoulders. Maria had accepted his offer, and although Emma wasn't happy about it, thanked the headmistress and the newest X-Man repetitively. When it came time to wake Sally and tell her she would be moving, she initially freaked out when Maria or Emma approached her, a red force field shielding her from any type of communication as it formed a sphere around her. It turned out that only War could touch the shield without instantly being drained of energy. And to make things even more shocking to the two women, War was the only one keeping Sally calm. "God bless you!" Sally chirped from her perch on War's shoulders while the other X-Men present helped Maria carry some boxes to the Blackbird. Wolverine smirked in War's direction, earning a scowl from the blonde as his eyes flickered red. Cyclops and Hank were both talking to the heroes Iron Man and Captain America about the Hero Registration Act as the two helped move the family while Emma shielded them all from view with her telepathy while sitting in the cockpit. "War!" Cyclops called, gaining the blonde teen's attention as he walked over, still carrying Sally on his shoulders. Beast tried hard not to crack a smile at the sight of the blonde carrying the green-eyed girl. "Whatcha want, Shades?" War asked as he arched a brow, not knowing that Sally looked down at him and tried to duplicate his face. Beast couldn't take it anymore and rushed to aid Wolverine, laughing along the way. Cap and Iron Man snickered as the girl made several faces, trying to nail the blonde's own expression. Said blonde looked at them as though they were crazy and asked, "Are you two girls laughing at?" "And nothing," Iron Man said, clearing his throat, a smile evident in his voice, "just wondering how you would suggest we improve the HRA." "Got any ideas, you're asking me?" War asked, a smirk crossing his face. "'Cause honestly I say it and let everything go back to how it was. But that's not an option anymore." "You're right, and while I agree with the fact that unmasking the superhero society would severely endanger thousands, it has to work somehow," Cap said, crossing his arms over his chest. Cap then pulled his mask down so it dangled over his back and held his hand out. "Steve Rogers, or Captain America, by the way." Naruto grabbed Steve's hand firmly, shocking the super soldier with his own improved strength. "Pleasure's mine, Cappy." "Naruto Uzumaki, now known as War." "Cappy?" Steve repeated in confusion as Wolverine doubled over in laughter when he overheard the nickname. Iron Man removed his helmet, revealing a man with sharply trimmed black hair and a neat artist's goatee, and offered his own hand. A smile was on his face, and he chuckled at the nickname. "Tony Stark," he said as the blonde shook his hand as well. "Iron Man." "Gotcha, Tinny," Naruto said again, a scowl coming across the longtime Avenger's face while his friend smirked. Cyclops rubbed his forehead in embarrassment, while Sally giggled in amusement. "Anyway," Tony said once he got over the nickname Naruto had given him, "like Steve said, the HRA is needed, but we don't want the heroes to become the new police of the world under the government's control." "Then do it yourself," Naruto said as though it were that simple. "I mean, you have the funds, skills, know-how, and the right pulls to make this happen, right? Do it yourself." Tony and Steve exchanged a look while Naruto walked away before they looked back at Cyclops. The leader of the X-Men smiled and crossed his arms over his chest before proclaiming in an even tone, "Don't get any ideas now, boys. He's an X-Man." "For now, Summers," Tony said as he pulled his helmet back on and Steve pulled his mask back on, "we have to go talk to someone about this whole HRA thing." "I assume the X-Men are remaining neutral?" "Yes," Scott said evenly, his eyes narrowing behind his visor. Tony said no more as he wrapped his arm over Steve's shoulder, and the first Avenger held onto him with one hand as he shot into the sky. The headmaster of Xavier's shook his head slightly in an effort to calm down, and went back to the Blackbird, smiling as Naruto pretended to be a horse for Sally. "I'd like to see you try and take him, Tony," Scott thought as he boarded the Blackbird. "We're living here? It's so big!" Sally exclaimed from her spot in her mother's arms. Maria smiled as she was led through the mansion by Danielle Moonstar and Naruto, who carried the McTaggart bags with ease as they climbed the stairs. "You're telling me," Naruto muttered under his breath, Maria chuckling as they walked to the room Maria and Sally would be staying in. Consequently, Naruto was moved in right across from the two, a thought of Hank's to see if his hypothesis of Sally becoming attached to Naruto on a psychological level. The blonde collapsed on his bed after he helped move the McTaggart family into their room, a slightly larger room with enough room for the two of them, and just before he fell asleep, the bound of energy known as Sally came into his room. Last he had saw her, which was 30 minutes ago, she was going off to look around. War, 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 war! She cried, making the blonde boy whimper quietly before growling and sitting up. Yes, Sally? He asked tiredly. He blinked and sighed when Sally showed him one of Rockslide's hands, making him think two things as he heard Santo cry out in anger. First, I leave her alone for 30 minutes and she's already causing trouble. And the second being, how in God's name did she get that? I found this in the silver room. I think it's a hand. What should we do? She asked him in worry. Someone must be hurt. Sally, he muttered, rubbing his eyes, just put the hand down and it will go back to where it belongs. Okay. Are you sure, War? I don't want it to get lost, she proclaimed with innocent eyes. Just before Naruto could snap at the child, Maria, followed by a charred and missing a hand Santo, came into the room. Sally! Maria cried in relief as she picked the girl up and crushed her in a hug. I was so worried. Don't ever wander off like that again, or go into the damn danger room. Ow! Santo winced when Naruto chucked his own hand at his stomach, making the rock man wince and rub his stomach. The blonde teen then walked over and flicked his fellow teen in the head, making Santo yell in pain from the surprising force behind it. Baka, Naruto grunted as he ushered the McTaggarts out of his room. Get out of my room and don't swear in front of children. Jerk, Santo corrected himself at Naruto's warning glare. Nice save, the blonde smirked out before Sally escaped her mother's clutches and grabbed Naruto's hand, dragging him away with Maria following, a smile on her face. Weeks passed and Naruto slowly settled into his place as the new X-Men's newest combat teacher. Whenever they would enter the danger room with him, he went straight to War Zone, as Hellion jokingly called it. The blonde noticed that Mercury, or Cassie as she told him to call her, would glance at him every now and again, but shrugged it off. In the beginning, whenever it would come to a hand-to-hand no powers training session, Hellion or Rockslide would volunteer. Apparently the two had made a bet with each other concerning who would be the one to knock him down. This is the situation Wolverine came across when he entered the dojo sim in the danger room. Gah! Hellion cried out in pain as War twisted his arm and pulled it behind his back. The former leader of the new X-Men was on his knees while the newest teacher kept putting pressure on his shoulder. Wolverine remained quiet as he watched the blonde teach them in a way he highly approved of. How do you escape, Hellion? War asked as the teen yelped when he pulled on the arm in his grasp. Use your head. Ignore the pain. Think. I to give. Uncle! Uncle! Hellion cried out, making War scowl and release his arm sharply. The red-clad hero cradled his arm and made his way from the mat. War crossed his arms and looked at the team in front of him before his eyes locked on Mercury, an idea crossing his mind. Mercury, you're up, he said, making the group all look at the nervous redhead. Slowly, Mercury approached the mat War stood on, settling into a fighting stance she learned while training with Colossus and Emma Frost. War settled into his own stance, a beginning to what he called his Goken, and said, Begin. Mercury hesitated before hardening her resolve and rushing the blonde. She feinted a left jab and followed through with a right cross punch. Both were caught easily by War. She had anticipated this though and twisted her arms in an attempt to kick War in the left side of the head. War saw this and surprised her by releasing one of her arms, leaping up and over the girl that was in mid-kick with her arm still in his grip, before he twisted it in a similar fashion to how he held Hellion in. Mercury gasped at the pain she felt in her shoulder, only to yelp when her arm was jammed between her shoulder blades. Her face heated up when she felt War's breath tickle the back of her neck. You're now in a situation similar to Hellion, he informed her, not knowing that he was making her shudder at his proximity. How do you escape? I am ga. Mercury grit her teeth as he increased the pressure. He had his hand wrapped around her arm. As he increased the pressure, Mercury thought, this would be so much easier if I could just morph my way out. Ofo, duh. Before anyone saw it coming, Mercury made her arm become a liquid form, letting it slip out of War's grasp, and she rolled away as it reformed into the original shape it was in. Following her roll, she quickly leapt into the air and twisted into a roundhouse kick, knocking War onto the mat on his back. After the blonde got over his slight daze, he kicked back up to his feet. She was pleased to see War smiling at her in approval before he turned to the other new X-Men. Save for Prodigy, he was helping Sally with her schooling. Can anyone tell me what Mercury had just done right on her first try that none of you could figure out in a week? War asked the group. Elixir, who was shifting his attention from the teacher to the door anxiously, spoke as he realized what the lesson was. She used her powers to escape, the golden boy said with realization in his voice. War smiled and nodded in approval. Exactly, he said, making the others look at him with confusion. The rules of this fight were no powers unless absolutely necessary. You all need to learn to look underneath the underneath. My teacher, a mutant that goes by the name of Scarecrow, taught me that. So, Nariko started as the lesson. The true lesson came to her. The point of the fight wasn't to beat you with our powers, but to know when to use our powers to win. Summed it up to A.T. Surge, War said, a nod and a pleased smile crossing his face. He looked over the new X-Men as an evil glint crossed his eyes, and because Cassidy was the only one to get the underneath, she is excused from having to write a 3-paged essay about how she could use her powers to escape the subduing holds you learned over the past week. What? The new X-Men, save for Cassidy, exclaimed in shock. Naruto grinned. I want the essays on my desk by tomorrow at 1, Naruto said, snapping his fingers and looking at Wolverine. They're all yours, old man. Smug little prick, Wolverine said with a chuckle as he took over the training session while Naruto left to get a shower in. He laughed aloud when he heard the new X-Men all grown as Wolverine started the same simulation he had first done. Their mission was to beat his time, something they had been trying ever since school had started again. Very good, Sally, David said as he finished checking over the math the 7-year-old girl had done. I'm very impressed. Thanks, Prodigy, Sally said with a smile, revealing a tooth that had gone missing when she accidentally followed Naruto into his danger room session with Cyclops. She surprised them all, though, when she sucked all the energy from a sentinel that had her in its grasp, making it collapse with a loud, ground-shaking thud. Her sudden smack in the face from a robotic tendril, however, was the reason she had lost the tooth. It wasn't bad in her opinion, seeing as she got $3 for the tooth. David, Logan starting the danger room session, a voice said from their right. David and Sally looked up to see Naruto, now clad in a pair of lounge pants and a white tee with the Xavier insignia on the chest, leaning in the doorway. You'd better get down there. Thanks, Naruto, David said, smiling at the more experienced mutant before he turned to the bound of energy known as Sally McTaggart. Work on your spelling words. When I'm done with my danger room session, we're having a test. Ah, okay, Sally said with a slight pout before smiling. David smiled and stood from the kitchen table and went towards the danger room to get some training in while Naruto went and joined Sally at the table, stopping at the fridge to grab a yogurt cup for her and himself a small energy drink. How's it going, Munchkin? Naruto asked as he gave her the yogurt and a small spoon. Learning hard? Yup. Thanks, War, Sally said with a smile. Naruto smiled back slightly as he took a drink and started to help her with practicing her spelling words. About halfway through the third round of spelling her selected words, Sally looked at Naruto and asked, Am I gonna get a cool name? What? Naruto asked, thrown off track by the sudden change in her tone, from boredom to curiosity. The green-eyed girl looked up at him, her finished yogurt resting on her right. Like you, she said with a smile, I want a cool superhero name. Like Super Sally, Naruto chuckled and ruffled her hair, making the girl giggle, before he said, Well, at the X-Mansion, I notice people call themselves names similar to their powers. Like me, for example, an unstoppable force of God with the rage of the Hulk barely being contained. Or like Shades, he's gotta wear the weird one-eye visor, right? Well, that's why he's called Cyclops. Oh, Sally said in understanding, but when will I get one? You can have one whenever you want, the blonde informed her, unaware of the 3 sets of eyes watching him, one set belonging to 1/3 of a mind that watched him from the other side of the mansion, the second belonging to that of the girl's mother, who stood in the other doorway watching them with a smile. Though the first 2 meant no harm, the final pair had nothing but malice and hatred in the pearl color that seemed to have no pupils. The veins bulging around the eyes pulsing as blood flowed through them, and the eyes narrowed. I've finally found you, MK36, were the thoughts of the owner of the strange eyes as they continued to read the lips and eavesdrop. Can I have one now? Sally asked with excitement. Naruto chuckled. Of course, he said, before speaking sternly with a smile. But not Super Sally. The girl groaned in disappointment. Naruto made to speak again when the voice in the back of his head, not his AI, but his danger sense, alerted him to something. He leapt from his chair at Sally, barely keeping her and himself from being hit by the sudden explosion that happened behind him. Naruto looked down at Sally as his persona, normally relaxed, turned serious as he said, Sally, go to your mother. But I said go, Sally. War instructed, Sally nodding as she scrambled out from under War's weight to the doorway. A scream then came from the girl, War looking over to see why she had screamed when he froze. There, lying battered and broken underneath various amounts of rubble, was Maria McTaggart. Dead. right in front of her 7-year-old daughter, who was frozen as she didn't know how to comprehend the situation. Before War could go to the girl's aid, the clacking of shoes against the floor got his attention and he turned, only for his eyes to narrow. "Hello, -36 Malawin Quatches," the stranger said in a male voice, his girlish features making him seem elegant and graceful while his attire, a light beige flak jacket with dark pants and boots on his feet, screamed professional assassin. "Huganiji," War snarled, baring his teeth, the assassin with the all-seeing eye named Omni. "What are you doing here?" "I've been looking for you," Niji replied, his eyes still having the veins around them bulge. "You who have killed my father. You who have taken the honor of my family when you raped my to-be wife. First off, Hinata raped me," War growled, and she admitted it in court. "Secondly, she didn't get pregnant, right? No harm, no foul on my part. It is the will of fate that I kill you today," Niji said as he pulled a mask from around his neck up, a strange image resembling the Nazi swastika with a line going through it on the beige mask that had 2 holes to allow his eyes to be seen, while the Japanese kanji for fate was over the mouth, both symbols in black. "You know, before I knew you killed Maria I would have just broken your arms and called it a day," War said quietly, his eyes flashing red as his anger grew. "But now, I'm going to rip those ing eyes from your ing skull." He leapt at the other teen, surprising him as the red aura covered War and a roar escaped the X-man's mouth. Other faculty members and students arrived at the scene, David being the first to see Maria. "Oh God," he muttered, earning everyone's attention, before he went to Sally and grabbed her shoulders. He tried to move her, but the girl wouldn't budge. "Sally, come on, we have to go," David said quietly. Sally remained quiet as tears ran down her cheeks. Amara relieved David from trying to help the girl, picking her up with ease and carrying her down to the infirmary while the other X-men went to help War. "Die, you son of a bitch!" War roared, swinging a claw in Omni's direction. Blue aura covered Omni's hands and he deflected the attack. "You first," Omni replied in an even tone as he rushed forward and jammed 2 fingers into War's chest, just to the left of his heart. "Gah!" War gasped out as he felt difficulty in breathing. His AI was snarling, pissed that he didn't have any information on the foe save for the fact his eyes were all-seeing. "I don't know how he did that, but make him pay for it," Q snarled, displeased with the way the fight was going. War's eyes narrowed as he forced air in and out of his lungs, improving his breathing quickly. Omni's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You're stronger than before," Omni observed. "Father strikes almost killed you." "I built up resistance to that pussy attack style," War snarled before he spat blood to the side and cracked his neck. He flexed his hands, thus flexing the claw-like aura shroud, before he rushed at him again. "And I took up a certain style in case this fight would ever happen." He jumped, spinning in the air with his right leg swinging out. Omni's eyes widened and he started twisting in his place, a shield forming around himself. "Die!" the bloodthirsty War shouted as his foot connected with the blue spinning shield. A large explosion followed, the X-men rushing even faster to the scene. Omni pushed himself out of the hole he was shot into, sighing in irritation when the X-men stopped across from him. "Who are you and why did you attack our school?" Cyclops shouted in anger, his hand resting on the release trigger of his visor, itching to press it. "I am not here for your school," Omni replied. "I was dealing with a past issue." "What issue would that be, bub?" Wolverine asked with a snarl, his claws out and ready to slice the new foe to itty-bitty pieces. Omni's eyes narrowed at the yellow and blue-clad hero. "You act much like -36 Malawin Quatches," Omni said in disgust. "I should rid the world of you so no more failures like him exist." "I'm not a failure!" a voice roared from beneath him. Omni looked down just in time to be nailed in the jaw as War burst from the ground, his Xavier t-shirt torn and filthy, and his aura glowing brightly around him. Omni felt his jaw break from the attack and he flew back many feet before landing in a heap on the ground. War snarled before launching the extended claw at the assassin, wrapping around him before throwing him into the air. War bared his fangs as his hands stayed about 3 inches apart, a mass of black energy growing between them. Slowly, as the mass sped up and formed a sphere, War closed his hands together until they were clasped around the energy. He then took a deep breath before opening his mouth in a roar, the black energy spewing up at the descending Omni. Omni's eyes widened as he realized this was where he would die. The energy enshrouded him, burning him intensely and making him yell in pain. When the burning stopped, Hyuga Niji plummeted to the ground, landing in a broken heap. He looked up to see War standing over him, anger gleaming in his red eyes. "Just so you know," he said, "your father died in a tournament against Cloud. You killed an innocent human mother, ruined the life of an innocent mutant little girl, and now she will have the same hatred you have. I hope you're glad fate led you to this. Tears were streaming down Niji's face as he accepted the truth. He deluded himself into thinking negative 36 Malawian kwachas was to blame for his father's death, as he fought his father just before the tournament started, the outcome being negative 36 Malawian kwachas the winner. That was over 7 years ago. He started the cycle again. He ruined a life and ended an innocent one. War turned and walked away, not before pausing one final time and turning to face the broken assassin. He picked a rock from the ground and chucked it directly at Omni's head, either killing him or knocking him out. War didn't care anymore. He had to get to Sally. War! Emma exclaimed in shock at his action, only to be silenced when the glowing red eyes of the blonde locked on her and narrowed. "The do you want?" he snarled, making the headmistress back down. War snorted before walking back to the X-mansion, ignoring everyone that stepped out of his way. He did notice that Hank, Cassidy, and Logan all followed the blonde when he went to the infirmary. Amara gave him a glance and quietly left the room, ushering Logan and Cassidy out as well while Hank stayed with War. "She's in shock, Naruto," Hank said as he looked at the devices hooked up to her. "She'll be fine." "Yeah," the blonde replied in a dead tone. The blue lionish mutant looked at his godson, frowning as the teen stared down sadly at the girl lying on the bed. Naruto looked so exhausted that it gave off the image that he was almost 3 times his age. Hank frowned, wondering why his godson would look like that, when he heard Naruto ask him something, but missed the question. "What was that, Naruto?" Hank asked. Naruto spoke quietly and neutrally, something that did nothing to soothe the worry in the scientist's mind. "Please leave, McCoy." Despite his better instincts screaming for him not to leave, Hank did as he was asked and even shut the door behind him. No sooner had the door clicked shut did Naruto put his head in his hands and fall to his knees on Sally's right. "Oh God, what have I done?" he asked no one. His AI, although an advanced computer, remained silent as the blonde sobbed. Q knew that Naruto would get past this feeling of guilt and come out stronger, but it would rather that the blonde didn't have to go through this moment again. "It's always like this," the blonde said softly, reciting a story he heard from Dr. Sarutobi. "I bring nothing but conflict and sorrow no matter where I go. War. An ideal name. One of the 4. The beginning of the end. Pestilence, the one bringing vengeance through pain of illness. Famine, starving the remaining guilty until they relent and beg forgiveness. Death, the mercy given through the end of their life." Famine, a quiet voice said, making Naruto look over at Sally in alarm that she was regaining some consciousness. "What was that, Sally?" Naruto asked quietly. The green eyes blurred by tears and her eyes locked on Naruto's blue and red ones. "I wanna be Famine," Sally said with a sniffle. "Make them sorry." Naruto smiled softly and brushed some of her brown hair away from her face and kept his hand on her cheek. "Famine it is." When the X-Men entered the room to check on their newest member and the girl, they came across the sight of Naruto asleep on the bed with Sally nuzzled into his side, also asleep. The blonde's arm around her protectively, leaving an unsaid, unwritten promise left by the blonde. "No one will ever hurt Sally again." Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow. This page has been abandoned 93 for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.